Welcome to Learning Module 12. This week will be all about emails and landing pages. So both the emails and then where people go once they click on that email link and where they end up being taken to. Now when I talk about landing pages, in this case it's the context of what happens when people click on an email. It can also be the same thing when people click on anything. So we've talked about landing pages in the context of online advertising as well. But for this first video, we'll talk about how to conceive of an email campaign. So let's get into it. We're going to cover a couple things. The first is, why do you need email? Why do you need an email campaign? With things like Facebook and Twitter really taking all of the attention and holding all of the conversation, why would you do something like email? Why does it make sense? Then we'll talk about how one would conceive of an email. So what is the email that you want to send out? Who do you want to send it to? And how do you begin to think about that process? And then in the next presentation after this, we'll talk about writing your email and then sending and analyzing the results of an email campaign. So the first step is, why would we want an email? Why would we consider an email a good tactic, given that it doesn't really get that much attention in terms of other tactics? It might seem passé, so why would we do an email? I talked about The Field of Dreams back in week 1. It's a Kevin Costner movie, and the key quote from it is, "If you build it, he will come." People tend to think this way when it comes to new media and social media or any digital campaign, that if you build a website, people will just come, it'll go viral. Email is a really good way to actually help people come to what you have built. With email, it's a one-way conversation, and you send it out and you disseminate a message, and it moves out quickly and timely. And so it helps promote word of mouth, and it's this big, instantaneous one-way driver. So if you have an email list of 10,000 people will have a message in their inbox within a few minutes of you sending it. So it's a really great way to push one way a lot of people to one thing at one time. And then in comparison to something like a text message that people would receive, it can have a lot more information, it can have graphics, it can be longer than a text message. It really is a good way to tell a story very quickly. So why this? Email addresses, they build audience. So in that way, emails are a quick way for an audience to get news. It promotes an action. So I'm going to talk about a single focus email. Sometimes people have this tendency to make email about multiple things. You can do this, or you can do that, or you can do that, and don't forget to do this. We have found over time that the emails that are the most successful are the ones that are very pointed and focused to one thing. They have a singular focus, they promote a singular action, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. And they also tell a story, they build characters, they build trust, and they build buy-in. So how do you take advantage of a one-way communications platform? By one way, I mean that you send a message and it goes to a lot of people. People don't necessarily have to respond to it. It's not quite a conversation like social media tends to be. It's this one way, and that's why people tend to call it an e-blast or an email blast. You just kind of send it out and disseminate it. So when you have this one-way communications platform, what can you do? Almost like a novel in a way, in that you can tell a story, you build characters, trust, and buy-in, but the story is built time after time. With email after email, you get to know a little bit more about a conversation, about characters. It's kind of like a serial novel in that way, where a story or a chapter is released chapter at a time. And over the course of an email campaign, you're telling this whole story. So there are 3 big rules to consider. So when somebody says, hey, we need an email campaign, there are 3 kind of rules that you should always have as an understanding when it comes to considering an email campaign. The first is that emails are not free. When it comes to things like online advertising, you're paying per each click. Emails, you can send it to as many people as you want, and people tend to think it's free. You don't have to pay to send it out. That's not true. Emails are very much a big time consumer. Thinking about an email in its proper form, writing it, coming up with something like the landing page, which I'll show you in one of the presentations this week. It's very time consuming. It takes a lot of input. And because it is kind of a long form story that you're writing, it needs to be really well planned out. Each email needs to build off of each other to create that serial novel in a way, as I just mentioned. So when it comes to resources and the expensive resources, emails are definitely not free. They take up a lot of time. So if somebody says, oh, just do it, it's free, it's an email, weigh the consequences of that. It's always best to keep an email simple as well, very clear, very focused, very singular action, as I talked about. And I'm going to be talking about that in a little bit as well. The idea with an email is that you do want to keep it simple. You want to tell your story, but you want people to get it right away. Something almost too intricate with too many moving pieces that isn't clear and concise doesn't make a lot of sense when it comes to email, because people will they might open your email, but it might not be a long time that they keep the email open. So you have to grab their attention and really focus them in. And by diluting it with too many things to do, or making it too intricate, it can take people away from clicking and from reacting to your emails. Keeping with number 2, small is beautiful. Keep your email short as possible while telling your story. Keep it simple, make it look nice and streamlined, and I'll show you how to make your paragraphs much smaller in a way that people can kind of skim your email. Long paragraphs are well out of favor, and short, snappy sentences that don't take up too much length. I'll show you this in pictures in a little bit when it comes to the email writing section. But the idea is that people can skim over it, glance over it, and really get what you're saying. And then throughout your email campaign, your main goal is to send great emails that people, A, find useful, B, want to open and read, and then C, that they want to share. So it's useful because it's relevant to them. They want to open and read it because it's valuable to them. And then they want to share because it's not only valuable to them, but they feel as though this is something that other people should know about as well. So that is your main goal in an email. That is the best way to ensure success, that people find it useful, that they want to open and read it, that they want to share it. And that should really be your focus in creating an email, no matter what kind of email that you send. And an email can be several things. When you think of an online email campaign, what comes to mind? There are many different ways of sending emails, and they can take up different forms. It can be an urgent alert, so something news breaking happens and you want to send that out to a lot of people and as many people as quickly as possible. You can send an email. It can be valuable information, so perhaps not so urgent, but something that people would stop people in their tracks, that it adds to the conversation and it adds to their base of knowledge. It can be a newsletter, so many different things that happened at once and you want to send this to a certain group of people. It can be a fundraising ask, so if your organization is looking to raise money, an email can be a solicitation for that. It can be an event invitation. And it's a relationship building communication. And this is kind of the case throughout, no matter what the other bullet points were. They all tend to be relationship building communication. Even though it is one way, you want to provide them with information that allows them to trust you a bit more, to almost look forward to hearing from you. So you never really want to be a bother, and you really want to, this goes back to the notions of just creating value. When you give value to somebody, when you do something that is valuable to them, it does help create a relationship between the two of you, because that person does look forward to your information and they value your information. And so that is kind of what you want to do in any kind of email. Also, you want to be welcoming. What this kind of means is that you want to, when they do join your email list, you want to thank them for joining. So is there a rapid email that automatically goes out anytime somebody signs a form? Does somebody on your team actually send them an email that is a personal email and a welcoming email when they first sign up? That might be one thing that you want to do. Emails help to get to know an audience better by looking at what they're responding to, what they're opening versus other emails. You begin to know a little bit about them and what they're interested in and where they want to spend time. You want to give them something to do. You know, there's nothing more awkward than somebody coming in and to your house and then just sitting around. So you want to give them specific actions. What can they do to help the cause? They've signed up for a reason. What can you do, or what can you ask them to do that they find valuable and that will be valuable to the effort that you're together with? And then you want to engage them in conversation. So when you do send an email, is there a way for you to get a response, to get something from them? You know, do you take them to a sign-up form where you're asking for comments, for information from them, for them to tell a story, for them to send in pictures? It's a way for you to solicit something, even though it is that one-way communication that we talked about. Your ask and your email can be a way for them to give something back to you and for you to listen to them. So now that we're kind of on the same points about what an email is and what an email campaign can do for you, how do you go about conceiving an email? How do you go say, all right, I want to send an email about this, and I want to send it to these people, and I want to send it at this time. I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process here on how to conceive an email. So we'll talk about where a list comes from. How do you actually get an email list? Where does it come from? How do you make it bigger so that you can start figuring out who you're going to send your email to? You want to, before you have an email, you need to know who you're sending it to and where that group is coming from. How to target your audience. So that means, can you divide up your email list? Does it make sense to divide up your email list into different kinds of stakeholders to send them different messages? And why would you do something like that that does split up an audience? You want to have one ask, just one that we talked about. So rather than asking them to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps, as we talked about in the last couple of slides, you want to make this clear, focused, and pointed and specific. And you want to drive people generally to one thing. You want to have a single ask of them. You don't want to confuse them because email, you're not spending a lot of time with them. They're going to breeze through your email. And so how do you keep it focused to only one ask so that people aren't confused about what to do? Because if people are confused about what to do and what you're asking for, they generally won't do anything. They're not going to usually spend the time to figure it out, to reread the email several times to go, okay, what do you want me to do? You want me to do this, then that, then that. Okay, let me do that. They're generally just going to click right out. So you want to keep it as focused as possible. And then also you want to decide on a small and consistent set of senders. This means the from email, the from field when you get an email from this person, from that person. If you're working with an organization, you don't want to make that list of characters too many people. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but the idea there is, can you have a small group of people that when you send an email, that your email list kind of recognizes those people, not having too many people where they have to because there's a little bit of trust in when somebody opens up an email. If you know the person or you've seen that name before, you're more likely to open up that email. So the idea is that rather than having 15, 20 people from an organization sending a group emails, can you narrow it down to 2 or 3 people, maybe each that has a different tone, but that helps build trust and it helps people open up your emails. So where does a list come from? The first pool of people is really your online or your digital list growth. So this comes from things like petitions, from sign-up forms. It can also come from Google and Facebook ads. It can come from promotion by friendly bloggers. When you do good online activity, your list will grow bigger. The second is there an in-person boarding process for in-person activities. So do you have paper sign-up forms in an event asking for people's email addresses? When people sign into an event, ask their email addresses. When you talk to them on the phone, ask them what their email address is. Anytime that you talk to them, is there a way that you can get their email address? And then partner integration. There are co-branding opportunities. So when you are working with allies, is there some sort of mutual shared list that you can both send an audience to, a landing page together? There are also partners, there are organizations, one's called change.org, where you create an email petition together and they promote it. And anybody that signs that petition, you then get their email addresses. That is a paid option. Generally, you work with them for their services, but the idea is that they create like a petition that people sign up online, and then you get the email addresses of people who have signed on to that petition. So that's what I mean by partner integration. Now, where should not an email address come from? Let's talk about that. Number one, you never want to email people who did not opt into your list. That means that if they didn't give you express permission to join your email list, whether it's through online, whether it's in person, if you get an email list from your friend or a bot list, people actually sell email address lists. That is not called an opt-in. An opt-in means that they expressly signed in with you and agreed that you should email them. Always email people who opted in. Never email people who do not opt into your list. That is a best practice. There are issues of canned spam laws and legality when it comes to that. But also, the most important thing isn't the amount of people that you're sending an email to. It's the number of times that they opened the email and the number of times that they clicked on the email. So just because you have a large list and you send an email to 100,000, I'd always rather send it to a smaller list that gets more open rates, that gets more click rates. People that just because they opened up your email or just because you sent them an email and it's in their inbox doesn't mean that somebody saw it, that somebody comprehended it, that somebody understood it. So always go with a list of people who have opted into your list, not a group of people that didn't. Smaller is better here. Never email people who ask to be removed. So if somebody unsubscribes from your list, definitely respect that. Never rent or buy a list of people who did not opt into your list. This is a bit of a repetition of the first one, but it's because it needs to be stressed so much. There are email vendors out there who will ask you to buy a list. I'll give you $2. You give me $2 and I'll give you an email address. And I can give you 100,000 email addresses. Sounds like a bargain. Maybe, maybe not. But the idea there is we're kind of breaking that first rule, that best practice. And like I said, there are legality issues here. How would you feel if somebody, if you became part of somebody's email list and you didn't want to hear from them, you've never opted into them? It's almost like the telemarketer thing, and you don't really want to represent your organization in a sleazy way. So you always want to get that opt-in. Only email people who want to hear from you. And don't send emails that people wouldn't find useful. So going back to the idea of what is useful, there's that gut check of, would I want this email? And hopefully if you're with that organization, you would want that email. So would my friends want to hear from me about this email? Why am I sending this email? Does this email add value? Or are they just going to find this annoying and kind of spammy? So that's something to consider, and never send an email like that. But what you want to do instead is you really want to target your audience in the right way. Think about, why did your subscribers join your list? And then also, what messages that you want to send match the interests of which of your subscribers? That means if you have two different kinds of people that are on your list, young people and old people, let's say, that's a good, interesting one. When you send an email, maybe you only want to send this email to a certain group of your list. Maybe it's not something that people of a certain age would care about versus another group of people. So you want to consider what messages match the interests of a specific group of your subscribers. So when thinking about your list, there are a couple ways that you can kind of carve up your list based on messages. Demographics is one. Where do they live? So perhaps you're sending a turnout email. It only makes sense to send it to people who are close to that event. If this is a national email and you're only doing an event in Philadelphia, does somebody in California need to see that email? And then how do they get on your list, and how long have they been on it? If you have this very high bar ask, like to show up in person to something, to volunteer for a weekend, you're only going to want to send that to people who have been on your list for a while, have denoted the idea that they are interested. Somebody that signed up yesterday and isn't totally bought into your campaign might not find that very interesting or valuable or really want to take part. So you can consider how long they've been on your list and how bought into the campaign they are. Do they open your emails? That's always a good one. If these people are not opening up your emails, perhaps you don't want to send that to that group, or you want to send them less email than people who open up your email all the time. What actions have they taken? So where have they shown their interests to be? Maybe you only want to send them emails that have something to do with that. Then what issues did they act on? Similar. And then their strategic role. So going back to even just the ideas of what does this campaign want to accomplish, you'll have multiple populations and you'll want each to accomplish something different. So divvy them out by that. And what you can do in any kind of email tool is you can look through this data, you can look through your metrics, or you can upload them into different groups when you're uploading an email into a system. And you can separate them out and you can send them emails that are different based on these roles. Now, and then basically by segmenting, what you're doing is you're keeping your members and your supporters interested, engaged, and subscribed by sending them only relevant information. So that goes back to the idea of sending them relevant information. By segmenting your list, you're just you're ensuring and you're being extra careful to send them things that they would care about. So just because you have an email list of 100,000 doesn't mean you want to send all of those 100,000 people everything that everybody else sees. The best way to keep engagement, to keep things relevant, is to siphon off your list into different groups and only send them things that they should be caring about. Then going back to the idea of just one ask. An ask is basically, where you want to see where your email's need comes from. What is the ask that we have of them? What do we need from them? What do we want them to do? That is an ask. So we want them to buy this t-shirt. We want them to write Congress. We want them to call Congress. We want them to show up to this event. What is the singular thing that you absolutely need them to do? This is the basis for your email because you want them to do something or you want them to know about something. And so you want to really keep it focused. So the first is simple, and simple really means just one. When you have one ask that you have of them, it becomes actionable. that means that they can go ahead and do it. You're asking them to do one thing, and therefore it's actionable. And it's simply, actionable. It's easy to do one step than to do this 4-step process. So you always want to have this one clear ask of them, which is the reason why you're sending the email, and that it's actionable, that they can go ahead and actually do it. And therefore it's relevant and it's opportune. So this means that it's something that's valuable to them, that'll help them get to where they need to be. They're part of your email list because they understand that you can help them accomplish something, whether it's buying a really good product or electing a politician that you want to have in office. So basically, you have something that's simple because it's just one. Therefore, it's actionable because it is relevant to you. And then it means that you want to do it because it's opportune to your interest. And that is what one simple ask should be. And then finally, you want to decide on a small and consistent set of senders. This is something that the Barack Obama campaign had done really well. They had created a certain amount of characters. There were 4 main characters in the last 2 cycles, actually. You had Barack Obama, you had Michelle Obama, you had Jeremy Bird, and then Jim Messina. Both of Jeremy Bird and Jim Messina were staffers from the Obama campaign. Each of these people had a different tone and a different voice. And if you notice Jim Messina and Jeremy Bird on here, it says Jeremy Bird, BarackObama.com is what it would say. Or Jim Messina, BarackObama.com. But the idea there is you're only getting emails from 4 or 5 people that you begin to know and trust. And if it's a good email campaign, when they write the emails, each person will have this different persona, this different tone. It's almost like you're a novelist or a short story writer, where each person, each character speaks in a different way based on their personality. And so when you have this small and consistent set of senders, it almost becomes like this person is emailing you. And like you can trust them, and you would open up their emails more because you're used to them being in your inbox. And so that's another way that you can conceive of a campaign. How can you keep it a small number of people? So now that we've talked about the fundamentals of conceiving of an email campaign, for the next video, we'll talk about writing and sending an email. So I'll see you there.